Okay, and really the more important news that I wanted to talk about was the passing of Koko the gorilla. And Koko was 46. She was born in San Francisco on the 4th of July, and her name is a shortened form of the Japanese word for fireworks. So she was named after the holiday. Very patriotic, very wonderful, and I'll certainly be thinking of Koko on the 4th of July coming up here. So this will be my third 4th of July in Vietnam. Anyway, Koko was discovered by a graduate student when she was very young, and this student decided to teach her sign language. And just out of this, we had no idea back then in the 70s whether gorillas understood sign language or anything at all. It turns out that they do, and they have their own system of sign language. But the system that she taught her was one of, it was based on American Sign Language, ASL. She started with very simple things like learning thirsty, hungry, whatever, more. I guess more is tapping your fingers together. And attracted a lot of attention. And when I first became aware of Koko, this goes back to my very early childhood, and it was that cover, I think it was 1989 cover of National Geographic. And you know, when I was a kid, we didn't have the internet, we just had print magazines, and so National Geographics were highly treasured. And I remember seeing that cover, the very wonderful cover of Koko photographing herself with a camera. And then the pictures of Koko with her kitten. And as a child, I remember being so struck by that. Like this gorilla, these gorillas that we consider like these brutes in the jungle, these muscular, mean, vicious creatures, these little King Kongs. It was amazing to see one cuddle with a kitten. The kitten whom she named All Ball, because the kitten reminded her of a ball. And it's interesting how she got to have that cat. And Koko, her trainer would read her books, English books, children's books, to help her learn, to help her study language. And one of the books that Koko really liked was a book about kittens, and it was cartoon kittens, but she expressed at some point that she wanted to have a cat for herself. In the same way that she often talked about wanting to have a baby, she said that she wanted to have a cat. And so they got her a cat, and she named the cat All Ball, and they would play together, and she would treat the cat with as much affinity and tenderness and gentleness as a human would treat a kitten. Really amazing stuff. Unfortunately, All Ball, it turns out, escaped from their residence. They had a place of several acres outside of San Francisco. The All Ball escaped and was hit by a car. And when Koko heard about that, she was absolutely devastated and crying. And, it took her some time to get used to that, but eventually they brought her some new cats, and her affinity for cats continued. Other things that we learned from Koko, she never had children of her own, but they introduced her to other mates. The first suitor they brought for her, they initially told her would be like her baby, or like they would be bringing her a baby, and she was disappointed when they brought him to her because he was a bit older, but still younger than Koko. And they formed a relationship that ended up being a sibling relationship, and for that reason they never had children of their own together. They just treated each other as brother and sister. Later on, as one documentary showed me, they tried to introduce her to potential suitors, and so they actually did video dating. This was the time of VHS. They would bring in VHS tapes of other gorillas, potential suitors, and she would look at them, and she would either turn it off or shrug or whatever. But in the case of the gorillas that she was attracted to, she would very clearly vocally sign that she wanted to bring them to her. And she would even kiss the TV screen to show that she had approved of these certain gentlemen. And they did bring her one of those gorillas, but that gorilla, they couldn't quite figure it out. They played and they had all the right settings, but she just wasn't in the mood. She wanted the baby, but she didn't want to go through the sexuality with the other male gorilla. And one theory, the theory that they came up with is that, well, with two male gorillas, typically these silverback gorillas in nature, the female is surrounded by other females. And so when she's with other girls, she feels more comfortable around the males. But in this case, Koko, of course, raised in a zoo, American gorilla, San Francisco gorilla, she only had her male suitors beside her. And so that made it difficult for her to get in the mood to have children. And so unfortunately, she never did. Other things that Koko has taught us. Well, one is that animals lie just like humans. And that's one of the most interesting stories about Koko is that once she was playing with her sink and she ripped it off the wall. Of course, gorillas are very strong. The typical gorilla, I found out, male gorilla anyway, is about, he has the strength of like 3 average men, even though he's a bit shorter. But anyway, she ripped the sink out of the wall. And when they asked her what happened, she said, Kitty did it. She blamed All-Ball, I think. She blamed her kitten. And of course, the kitten, very small, of course, would not be able to tear a sink out of the wall. But I think that's really amusing. And they've caught her on camera also. Like, she was not supposed to eat paper. They gave her magazines and stuff, but one problem is that she would take a sheet of paper and she would kind of eat it. And she would always get in trouble for it. And they caught her on camera doing it once. And she's kind of looking at the camera as she's holding the paper, like knowing that she's doing something wrong. Altogether, she had maybe 500 or 1,000, less than 1,000 words memorized, which really isn't that many when you think about it. In terms of American language, we talk about how high her IQ is and everything, but really that's such a small number of words considering what Americans learn, or Americans, what I mean humans learn. Humans learn thousands of words when they're still very little. And it seems that Koko was able to understand more words than she was able to express. And of course, Gorilla Sign Language, which I guess she invented, which is based on American Sign Language, has to account for the fact that their hands are shaped differently. They don't have 5 defined fingers like we do, but they have kind of it looks like a claw or something, almost like a bear. And so her adaptations have changed language. One interesting thing that she did, I guess the roughage that they serve to primates is called browse, just like a web browser. Browse. I'd never used that for food before, but I guess that's a typical term for the food, just the corn, grass, whatever they give to primates. And so they called it browse. And when Koko wanted it, she would do this thing. She would touch right here. And they couldn't understand that, but of course browse, like eyebrows, she was using the English sound, the sound of the English word to specify browse, which was the food. And so there were many cases of Koko coining words, I guess, or defining them on her own. And they kept very strict records of her life, so they'll go. We can go through and understand a lot of what she was saying, what she was doing, and what that teaches us. And appropriately, she was called the ambassador of the gorilla world. And this is also, I guess, the first or the most clearly recorded time in history when there has been a language connection between a human and a creature of another species. So anyway, I have a lot to say about Koko, and I miss her dearly, and it's just such a fascinating story. And I really think it's amazing what we learned through this primate, and it also makes me think, why don't I'm just going to stop everything. I'm not going to teach or do YouTube or anything anymore. I just want to study primates, because primates are the coolest thing. Anyway, I'm just talking. Thanks for watching Jika Jabo, and that's all I've got to say for now. May your path in life be free.